What I was hoping to do for this class is to explore a little bit of the background behind Tu B'Shvat, why it is the holiday that that happens to be on the calendar when it is, and use that as a chance to explore something broader, and that is one of the dynamics behind the way the Talmud works. Because we talk a lot about the Talmud, it is the basis of the way we practice Judaism. In many ways, even ways we may not even realize, the Talmud is key and central to understanding of the Torah, to what we do every day as Jews. Unfortunately, it also trends a lot online, and you see all kinds of crazy discourse, and people don't seem to really understand what it's about. That's one level. The other level is, I think, even for those of us within the Jewish community that are familiar with the Talmud on its most basic level, we often look at it as a bunch of rabbis debating. And what I want to do here is explore, what does it mean when you have these rabbis debating, and what are some of the dynamics that go on underneath these debates. And so I was hoping to make this a little bit more interactive, in the sense that I will kind of share a broader approach behind the debate in the Talmud, and then we're going to give out share a bunch of cases, and you guys can kind of guess or try and see how these cases might fit under that dynamic, which will, I think, make more sense once we get into it. But this is Tu B'Shvat and the Talmud. So we start off, what exactly is Tu B'Shvat? So one of the many of the mitzvahs in Judaism really center around living in the land of Israel and the type of agricultural society that they had then. There are many mitzvahs based around the land, about how to preserve it, how to upkeep it, how to take its fruits and use them to support the needy, and things like that. And so the most basic idea is that there is an obligation to give tithes throughout the cycle of the years to support various causes, to support the Levim, who were the educators, so to speak, among other jobs amongst the Jewish people. They were dispersed around Israel. They weren't a tribe. The tribe of Levi was not a tribe that was centered in one space. They were all over the place, and they relied upon the donations of the other tribes to support them. And beyond that, there was also one of many tithes to support the poor. There was extra money you would go and give to the poor people to be able to make sure they had what to eat. So the question is, if you're growing grain and you're growing trees and you're growing all these different things, how do you know when to give each tithe? As we'll get into. So the Torah begins. It says, "You shall tithe all the seed crop that the field gives forth year by year. You shall eat before the Lord your God in the place He chooses, establish His name therein. The tithes of your grain, your wine, your oil, and the firstborn of the cattle and your sheep, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God all the days." So the idea is that through all the abundance that we're blessed with in our lives, we have an obligation to know that whatever God gives us, whatever we're privileged to have, there are those people and those reasons that those others that may not have that, and therefore we're going to give a portion of that to them. So the question then arises, if we're going to say that my tree, right, grows, a certain amount of apples. Let's say I have an apple tree, right? And I know I want to give, a certain percentage of my apples to support the poor. Each year, I'm going to calculate how many apples my tree grows, and then I'm going to be able to give 10% to the needy or something like that. How do you calculate when the fiscal year, so to speak, for trees begins and when it ends? And that's Tu B'Shvat. Its most basic level is really this technical thing about how we calculate the year for the purpose of these tithes, of these charitable, we'll call them givings. You need to know when the year begins and ends, and therefore we have to cut out a time when the new year for trees begins, and all the crops that grow from before that time are 1 year, and after that are another year. So that's the basic thing. So the Talmud says in Tractate Rosh Hashanah, it gives us 4 different major Rosh Hashanahs. We all know kind of the famous one with the shofar, when the Jewish year, the calendar year begins. But there are other holidays. So these are the 4 days in the year that serve as the new year, each for a different purpose. On the 1st of Nisan, the first of the month of Nisan, that's the month of Passover, is the new year for kings. People used to write contracts and say, this many years, in the reign of our king, right? So how many years do you calculate, that a king reigns for? If a king, only lives for half a year and passes away, another king takes over, how do you calculate a year? So they decided the 1st of Nisan, that's going to be the date that we're going to, if you want to calculate how long we're talking about the reign of a king, it's from this particular date. There'll always be clarity going forth. There'll always be consistency about when you would write on a contract the year of the king. It's also the new year for festivals, that if a person says, I'm going to go and bring a beautiful sacrifice, I was blessed this year, I want to bring a sacrifice. The sacrifice was consumed by the person and by the priests and by other people, so it's kind of this joint thing. I'm going to bring a sacrifice to the temple, and I'm going to, and makes this pledge. How do you calculate how long that person has to fulfill the pledge? So that's based on the cycle of the festivals. So again, so that is the first Rosh Hashanah. And we're skipping forward to the fourth one. On the first of Shvat, which this is the month of Shvat right now, is the new year for the tree. The fruit of the tree that was formed prior to the date belonged to the previous tithe year and cannot be tithed together with the fruit that was formed after the date. This is the ruling according to the statement of Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel says the new year for trees is on the 15th of Shvat. 15 in Hebrew is written Tes and Vav, which can be read as 2 B'Shvat. And this is where we come up with the idea of 2 B'Shvat. There's a debate in the Talmud between these two major schools of Talmudic learning, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were two very, very central rabbis. There are many stories in the Talmud about them personally. They also created schools. They had yeshivot. They had places of study. And therefore, each group had its own approach to the Talmudic text, its own approach to understanding things. And that created this, so to speak, this debate about how we're going to figure out when, many different debates in the Talmud. Generally speaking, Beit Hillel is more lenient. They tend to be more more permissive. I won't say lax, but permissive in things. They're more willing to view certain things in a more lenient way. And Shammai tends to be more stringent, and there are many debates. This is not always the case. There's actually a whole tractate of the Talmud that says when do they take the other approach, and that Beit Shammai is more lenient and Beit Hillel is more stringent. But these are these two schools of thought. So the question is, what makes these rabbis debate? Was it just that like Shammai was like grumpy and Hillel was like a nice guy? That's not the case, right? There's obviously something more going on there, especially if you're speaking about an academy, a school of thought. Then the fact that you have one school is always kind of going towards one particular type of answer, and the other one is going to another type of answer. It's because there's a deeper tension that goes beneath each debate that creates a philosophy of studying the text and therefore leads to a similar set of conclusions throughout. And this is some of the later day parsings of the Talmud, and understanding the Talmud is how to look at it not as a series of debates that just happen to be a debate here, a debate there, and Judaism is a bunch of Jews arguing, even though it also is a bunch of Jews arguing, I think, as we've known. But beyond that, there's also a philosophy behind each school and an approach to each one. So the question is, what is the approach of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel? So that's the nature of Talmudic debate. So when it comes to Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, there is a way of viewing their debates as one is looking after what the case in front of you, the way it presents itself right now. Right now in front of you, I see a certain thing. This is called poel in Hebrew. This is the kind of the current situation in front of you, and it can be viewed in that way. The other way of viewing it is koyach, is the potential that it has to reach at some later point in time. And therefore, often, though not always, Hillel will take an approach that looks at poel, looks at the situation in front of you, the way it is right now. This is the moment that we have in front of us, and we'll bring some cases, and then we'll kind of guess how they could be. Some of the cases could be viewed through this lens. The way Hillel sees it is the way it is in the case in front of you, and Shammai wants to see the potential this has to reach, where it will ultimately be, and that's the way they view things. And that causes the kind of their various opinions of the Talmud to come about. So I'm going to give one of them, probably one of the most famous debates between Hillel and Shammai, and that's about how do we light the menorah when it comes to Hanukkah. Hanukkah is relatively recently, and I think we all kind of remember somewhat. You have the candle, you have one candle, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, adding one candle each night. So the sages taught in a Braita, which is a certain type of Mishnaic Talmudic teaching, that the basic mitzvah of Hanukkah is each day to have a light kindled by a person, that a household for himself and his household. That the most basic level of Hanukkah, which no one actually does today, is you only light one candle every single night, and it's one candle for the entire house, and that's it. Okay, it's kind of, it's pretty simple. And no one does it. Everyone wants to do it nicer. So the Mahadran, the more meticulous way of doing it, is light for each and every one in the household. That every person lights the light. If you have a bunch of roommates staying together, you don't just have one person say, hey, Moshe, you're going to light the candle for us. No, we say every single person gets to light a candle and have a candle going in their place. And the Mahadran, the most meticulous, the best way to do the mitzvah is that we're going to adjust the number of candles each night. So Beit Shammai says on the first day one kindles 8 lights, and from there on gradually decreases the number of lights until on the last day of Hanukkah he kindles just 1 light. And Beit Hillel says on the first day one kindles 1 light, and from there on gradually increases the number of lights until on the last day he kindles 8 lights. So there are two ways to light the menorah in this debate, in this paradigm, right? Where Hillel, the way we do it practically, is every night we're increasing in lights, and Shammai is saying, no, every night you're decreasing in lights. So how does that fit into the koyach and poyel, these two ways, the way it is in front of us and the way it is in potential? So Shammai is saying, how many nights are ahead of us when it comes to Hanukkah? There's 8 nights ahead. The potential for Hanukkah is 8 nights of Hanukkah. Therefore, we're going to light 8 candles. You get to the second night, and you now have 7 days of Hanukkah ahead of you. We're getting confused on the math over there. Then you're going to have 7 candles. Each time you're looking at the potential for the holiday as a whole, and therefore you're decreasing the number of lights because the potential to add light each night decreases because you're going over what is destined to be. You're looking at the end game. Hillel is looking at the case in front of you. Tonight is night 1, so you're lighting 1 candle. Second night is night 2, you're lighting 2 candles. And all the way building up until we light 8 lights. So that's an example of how this debate is not just one decided one way and the other decided the other way, but rather there's an underlying tension behind it that they're looking at the end. Shammai is looking at the end game, and Hillel is looking at the immediate case in front of us. So I'm going to share a couple more cases, just a few, and then we're going to get back to how Tu B'Shvat fits under there. So this is the very first teaching in the Talmud. The very, very beginning speaks about when we say the Shema. Now, the rabbi being quoted over here is Rabbi Eliezer. He was a student of Shammai, and therefore he is following the Beit Shammai tradition, even though it says it's the name of Rabbi Eliezer. And the rabbis are following the Hillel tradition, and we follow the rabbis ultimately. So there's an idea that the Jewish people say the Shema. It's the foundational call to prayer, and there's a mitzvah to say it every morning and every evening. So until what time does the time for the recitation of the evening Shema extend, right? You have to say the Shema, and you can begin at one time and you have to be done by another time because you're supposed to say it every evening. How do you calculate evening? Is it until a certain point in time, or is it the whole night? How does it work? So until the end of the first watch. The term used in the Torah is to indicate the time for the recitation of the evening Shema is b'shafcha, when you lie down, which refers to the time in which individuals go to sleep. Therefore, the time for the recitation of the Shema is the first portion of the night when individuals typically prepare for sleep. That is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. So the mitzvah is to say Shema in the Torah. The Torah just says you should say it when you lie down. How do you calculate when you lie down? Because people go to sleep all different times. So Rabbi Eliezer says the first part of the night, the first third of the night, between, if sunset's at 6 o'clock, between 6 and 9 o'clock, let's say, or whatever it is, when you're talking about a 12-hour night. So 6 and 10 o'clock, there we go, because it's the first third of the night, that's the time you can say the Shema. And the rabbis say, no, you could say until midnight, you could say it until later, until the middle of the night. That's until what time you have to say the Shema. So how does this fit into this idea of looking at the potential versus looking at the practical in front of you? Where one opinion says that you have to basically say it at the very beginning of the night, and the other opinion says you could say it for most of the night or until the middle of the night, which is so I don't know if anyone wants to hazard a guess. This one's a little bit more abstract, but
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question is, we have 2 times to say the Shema. The commandment, the Torah says you have to say the Shema when you lie down. How do we calculate what time you lie down? The Shammai approach, we're going to call it, that's Rabbi Eliezer, if you're looking at the text, the Shammai approach is you have the first third of the night to say it. That how do we calculate what time you lie down? The very beginning of the night. That's the time you lie down. And the broader approach is, no, you have until, the middle of the night or the end of the night, so to speak. You have, far later time to lie down. How do we see the idea of where the potential, we're looking at the end game, so to speak, and we're looking at what's in front of you now?
Could the Shammai approach is saying that the whole night is still in front of you? So he wants the Shema to happen before the full night is not, like before any part of the full night passes. So he wants the full night still in front of you when you say it. So that's potentially forward looking, versus Hillel saying that as long as it's still night at any point, it's fine.
Yeah, that's basically the basic idea over there, meaning the wording, at least, I would use to describe it, which I think we're on the same page over here, is that the Shammai approach is saying the commandment is to say the Shema when you lie down, right? When you prepare to lie down, right? you prepare to lie down. In the evening, everyone kind of looks at the evening and begins to kind of calculate and says, okay, at some point in time tonight, I'm going to be lying down. And therefore, let's say it now. Let's say it right away when we're looking at the time when the preparation begins. The potential is there, so to speak, because you could begin lying down at any point in time. And the rabbis are saying, Bapoil, practically speaking, when do people sleep? Everyone lies down by midnight, and therefore we're going to draw a line by, I guess I'm abnormal, so sometimes for me it's after midnight, but the point is that your average person is going to sleep by that time, and therefore we're looking at when's the actual end time, the actual time that we say someone goes to sleep, and it's at that point in time. The next case, which is actually the very last teaching in the Talmud, so this is a type of debate that literally spans the entire corpus of the Talmud, not to say that every topic is always Hillel and Shammai arguing, though it may seem that way. But this one I think is a little bit, it's a little bit clear how it applies. This is the very last teaching. So that we're speaking about ritual impurity. How ritual impurity works, we're going to put aside right now. We're just going to work under the understanding that honey is a liquid that if it touches food, it renders it susceptible to impurity. There's certain things that you have to eat in a state of purity in the temple. They have to be kept ritually pure. And how does something become susceptible to ritual impurities if it gets wet? That's the basic premise that we're working under. So the question is, if honey is this liquid, at what point in time is honey considered something that can make something impure? When do we look at this honey and say, now it's a liquid, now it's a state that could render something impure? So when do the honeycombs become susceptible to impurity on account of the honey being considered a liquid? You have a honeycomb, there's honey inside of it. At what point in time do you say that this honey is now a liquid that is consumed by people and can then render this thing impure? Beit Shammai says from the moment one starts to smoke out the bees, while Beit Hillel says once one breaks up the honeycomb, only once you actually have the honeycomb there and you have the honey out and you're pouring into your cup or your vessel, whatever it is, at that point in time, it becomes a liquid that can make things impure. I don't know if I should say that we should keep doing the
barley.
It seems like Beit Hillel is kind of approaching it from like a more compassionate, like what's the most realistic thing for to happen, whereas Beit Shammai is much more like hesitant. So he's like, okay, any human involvement whatsoever comes from like when there's no honeybees there, like now we're taking responsibility. But like Beit Hillel is like, okay, like practically speaking, it's sealed already by the honeybees. So like once you like cut it, now it's actually exposed. So
exactly, that's exactly it. Exactly it. So that once you have, when it's there in potentially you could get it at that point in time. Shammai would say it's no good. And Hillel says that only once you actually have it in front of you and you have the honey and it's out and it's in your hands, in your domains, and you're working with it, it's in the actualized phase, that's the point in time that it could happen. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and do about those trees then. How do we see that this debate around Tu B'Shvat fits into this paradigm as well? So just to review what our Mishnah said, on the first of Shvat is the new year for the tree, in accordance with the statement of Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel says that it's on the 15th of Shvat. Why do we have these two different days? So the answer lies in an understanding of things based on the Jerusalem Talmud. There are actually two Talmuds that we have as Jews. There's the Babylonian Talmud, which when you speak about the Talmud, generally speaking, talking about the Babylonian Talmud. There's a second Talmud that was finished a little bit earlier, has less debate. It's much more kind of question and answer as opposed to really getting out and having that debate. That's Jerusalem Talmud. We follow the Babylonian Talmud because those debates allow us to get more details and to squeeze out more information and to have more potential cases to explore. And then for the Babylonian Talmud is considered much more thorough. But you have this case in the Jerusalem Talmud that says, what's the difference between these opinions? Up until then, they live from the rains of the past year. From then on, they live from the water of the next year. You have this water in the ground, and the debate between Hillel and Shammai, which we're going to have one more slide in a moment, which shows exactly what that means, is at what point in time are they getting new water in their roots that, and the new rains have come, there's new water, new rainy season has fully saturated the earth, and now the trees are not just using up the old supply of rain, but using new rain, and the sap is beginning to flow, and they're beginning to get ready for the new year. And so this, how this applies to our case, there are 2 points in time when we speak about the blessings of the year. At 4 times of the year, the world is judged. On Passover, concerning grain, on Shavuot, concerning fruits. On Rosh Hashanah, all creatures pass before him like sheep, as it's stated. He who fashions their hearts alike considers all their deeds. And on the festival of Sukkot, they are judged concerning water. So the question is, when do we have it being judged in this case means when can we say, hey, God, give us a break, give us some water in this world? We need water. And water is, essential to life. So there are 2 points in time when you have that happen. The broader thing, all the blessings come on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we ask for everything. The whole world is judged, every aspect of life, every moment. We could ask for whatever we want at that point in time. So Rosh Hashanah is the potential for any blessing, including water, right? That's the potential. When do we actually say, God, okay, now we actually need to talk about water because the rainy season is about to begin. We actually need the water in this world, and we're going to have a focused request about the immediate need. That's on the festival of Sukkot, which is 15 days after Rosh Hashanah. So if we think about when we have Shvat, at the beginning of Shvat, or the 15th of Shvat, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai is saying that as soon as the potential to ask for new rain comes about, that's when the potential for the year's rain begins. That is Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we're going to calculate that period of time on the beginning of Shvat. And Hillel says, no, we look at the case in front of us. When do we actually ask for water? When does the actual new blessings for the new year on water begin? That's on the 15th on Sukkot, and therefore 15 days later is the 15th of Shvat, is Tu B'Shvat. And therefore, I hope that this gives a bit of an explanation around some of the underlying tensions in the Talmud and kind of how it works, and appreciation of Tu B'Shvat. But I want to leave you all with a thought, a message, because it says that a person is compared to the tree of the field, that we're celebrating trees. Why are we celebrating trees? Yes, Jews, are care about nature around us, and trees are important, and appreciating the ecology in the world around us. These are all very, very important things, but there's a personal lesson for us as well. The reason why we make such a big deal about trees is because in many ways a tree is compared to a person. There are many different lessons that we can learn from trees. I want to share just one of them. And that is, sometimes in life you can look around you and it feels very, very cold, very, very foreboding. It feels like an uncomfortable, difficult time in the world, in life. I think especially the past year and a half, as Jews, I think many of us felt that as well. And you could feel like it's the middle of the winter, right? Right now, we're in the middle of the winter, it's February. It doesn't particularly feel spring-like outside. It doesn't particularly feel warm. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of vibrancy and life around us. It feels cold outside. Physically, it's cold. It was chilly when I walked over here. And in our lives, sometimes we feel like it's cold as well. But the potential, we have to look not at just the surface level understanding of nature, but right now, under the ground, underneath, the waters are beginning to flow. The spring is beginning to go into effect in ways under the surface that we entirely can't see. And that within us, within our own lives, the power, the pride that we have as Jews, all that exists under the surface. And the moment it now comes to take it and turn it into something that is not just in potential, but actually to bring it into effect in this world. And there's a custom to eat, the Tu B'Shvat Seder was mentioned at the beginning of this class, that there's a custom to eat some of the various fruits and learn lessons from the fruits. One of the fruits that there's a custom to eat is the olive. It's one of the plants that the land of Israel is blessed with. And there's a lesson we learn from the olive, because the olive in and of itself is bitter. It's not the sweetest fruit. It's not a pomegranate. It's not a date or a fig. It's a little bitter. It has some spiciness. We like it, but it's not. Sometimes it shows you that life can serve you bitter fruits. Right? You have bitter fruits in your life. But if you take the olive and you squeeze it and you apply pressure, then instead of being crushed and destroyed by the pressure around us, instead what we do is we channel it and focus it, that we're going to squeeze the olive and extract the juices. What do you get when you extract the juices of the olive? You get oil. Oil can be used to create light. That sometimes the most dire circumstances we find ourselves in, when we feel the real crush of life around us, it gives us the potential to be able to open ourselves up and find how the best stuff within us comes out. It calls out the best in us, and we can use that not just bring fruit for ourselves, but to bring light into this world, light that everyone can benefit from, and make this world a better place. So that's a little thought for Tu B'Shvat and a lesson from the tree. I want to invite all of you. We have every third Thursday we have a meetup. Would love for everyone to come. There's a QR code there as well, and I'm sure very reachable, and happy to share the information. But beyond that, I don't know if we have time for a question or two, or any thoughts or other lessons that you've learned from trees, because there are many such lessons.
So why is this holiday not something we have to celebrate? Like you started off with that.
So it's not they're holidays. It's the biblical holidays that are the three principal festivals that we have, which is Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Those are like the biblical holidays where there's certain ascribed commandments to do it. There's deeper layers of understanding that these are creating channels to the divine, bringing blessings in our lives, and there's different customs, and there's family celebration and prayer, and all different types of things that we do in terms of how we observe it. So that's kind of the Torah is giving us a certain way to celebrate. And there were rabbinic holidays, and when the rabbis made holidays, they said we want to copy the biblical paradigm, and we want to give you actions and things to do. So Rosh Hashanah is a biblical holiday; you blow the shofar, and Hanukkah we're going to light the menorah, which is a way to commemorate the holiday. On, Purim, we're going to read the Megillah. Right? We have various ways we're commemorating it in a way that's somewhat, akin to the way the the Torah suggests that we celebrate holidays. Then you have just days throughout the year. There are days throughout the year that have technical importance in Judaism. So this is a technical day. Really, it's a day around it's like a tax, day, so to speak. How do we calculate New Year versus Old Year? It's just a date on the calendar. But as Jews, so that's why there's nothing to do, right? Because it's just a day to know that if you, technically want to do something, then here's a day to do it. But as Jews, we don't want to just let a day on the calendar pass us by and say, oh, it's a day. No, we want to have meaning. We want to have ritual. We want to have purpose and community around us. And that's why Tu B'Shvat has become this day where we can look at it, as a chance to kind of explore those things.